In the midst of my lies, I'm swept upside down. The building, my body, and my stomach all lurch at seemingly different speeds. If there's yelling, it's drowned out by the whipping wind, by Godzilla's destruction. Today on the Comic Book Report, Godzilla's 70th anniversary from IDW. Stick around and check it out. Greetings everyone, my name is Dominic and today you're tuning in to the Comic Book Report where we review comic books and graphic novels so you can get an idea of what to read. And today I'm ecstatic to finally be breaking into the world of Godzilla comics. As a longtime fan of the extensive film franchise, I knew it was only a matter of time before I broke into the comics for myself. Imagine my delight when IDW saw fit to provide me with this review copy commemorating the 70th anniversary of this incredible character. And while I can't wait to dive into today's anthology collection of Godzilla, I want to first thank again IDW for sending over this review copy in exchange for this honest review. It means the world and I hope I do it justice. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. First, some quick facts about today's collection. The issues in this volume were written by James Stokoe, Dan DiDio, Matt Frank, and more, and illustrated by James Stokoe, Joel Jones, Matt Frank, and more. This collection was published by IDW in 2024. As far as what this edition includes, it collects The Half-Century Boar, Contagion, Of Gods and Con Artists, In the Shadow of a God, In the Darkness, The Big One, Ain't No Place for an Angel, In Summation, Aftermath, and reprints of Godzilla Legends Issue 5, Godzilla in Hell Issue 1, Godzilla Rage Across Time Issue 5, and Godzilla Rulers of Earth Issue 2. And finally, this is a standard size hardcover edition with glossy print paper stock, a sewn binding, and a total of 200 pages. At this time, I'd like to go ahead and issue a general spoiler warning. I will be flipping through the contents of today's collection and commenting on plot points throughout. You've been advised. Okay, and here's our first dedicated look at the front cover for today's collection for Godzilla's 70th anniversary. Love this cover image. It's a striking image of Godzilla, kind of electrical and ready to rock. I thought this was a really great choice for the cover for this commemorative book. I mentioned it earlier in the video, but yes, this is a standard size hardcover, so about the trim size or height of a floppy or single issue comic book or trade paperback, but it's still nice to have it in a hardcover edition. There is also no slipcase for this release, it's just the hardback book itself, but still quite striking, at least to my mind. The spine design for this edition I really liked as well. It's a field of black with Godzilla's 70th anniversary. We have the IDW logo at the bottom. It's crisp, it's clear. I think it's really striking on the bookcase. No complaints over here. I think it's really well designed. As we make our way to the back cover of this hardback book, we have Celebrate the 70 Years of Godzilla with this creepy image of Godzilla himself appearing from the shadows with glowing animalistic looking eyes and huge glaring teeth. We also have a nice blurb about the book, kind of collection details, pricing information, the publisher again, all really standard stuff for a back cover, but I love their choice for image here. Again, I just think it's really, really gorgeous. I love the shadowed look at Godzilla. Okay, and now for all you prospective collectors out there, I did want to show a quick look at this edition's binding. As I mentioned, I believe this is a sewn bound book. Mine laid open pretty well, minimal gutter loss I would say. You'll see more as I flip through the collection and you can make your determination for yourself, but I personally had no issue with this collection. It's not overly long, so I didn't feel like the binding was too jam-packed or anything. Overall, I think IDW did a good job. Okay, and with that, we can go ahead and break into the collection proper here. After some awesome end pages, we have a title page, publication information page, we have a full kind of broken down table of contents, which I love to see, and then we're off to the races with the first story in this collection. And as far as what is collected here, as far as I can understand, this is all a big one-shot that had kind of an anthology feel with 9 separate stories, plus a handful of reprinted stories at the back end, rounding out to give us a pretty cool experience commemorating the 70th anniversary for our favorite kaiju monster, Godzilla. Due to the anthology nature of this collection, you really don't need to read these in order, nor do you really need to have much pre-existing information whatsoever. If you know that there's a monster named Godzilla, that is really all you have as a barrier to entry to enjoy this work. I'm a longtime fan of the Godzilla film franchise, and I've always wanted to check out his comics in some form. I know Marvel did comics, a bunch of these different publishers have taken a shot at Godzilla over the years, but I've never really been able to venture into that world, so I was really elated to get this copy from IDW to review because it was fun seeing this film monster in a comic books medium. As far as the quality of the different stories in this collection, I think that for me they were a little uneven. Some I liked better than others, but I did really like that we had so many gifted writers and illustrators attached to this book. Frankly, it was a breathtaking variety of artistic talent, and I really enjoyed making my way through this book. Because it's an anthology, to me, I equate that to kind of a short story collection, which I also really enjoyed. This was the perfect book to take off my shelf, read a story or two, and put back on. It probably took me a few weeks to make my way through this book, not because it was overlong or that the material was dense or anything, but because I really liked savoring just a couple stories here or there. The stories themselves aren't overlong, sometimes no more than a few pages, but again, it was a really fun and overall satisfactory experience for me. For this video, I'm not going to talk about each individual story. I'll just kind of jump around and cherry pick some of my favorites. One, if not the earliest story in this collection, I think it's Half Century Boar, if I'm not mistaken. It concerns itself largely with two people that are basically put on for the Godzilla and other monster cleanup crew. Basically, they're the people brought in after the events have occurred, or sometimes during, to basically play cleanup and sanitize and figure out if there's radiated materials or what have you. And I thought that this was a really fun and comic concept, and I mean comic in the kind of uproariously humorous kind of way, not comic as in comic book. But yeah, I really enjoyed that. I thought it was really fun. The art style for that story as well had kind of an old school, almost manga feel to me in some ways, which I liked. Another story I really enjoyed had a con man who's basically trying to sell materials that he allegedly got from some of these monsters that had been left behind, and he's just trying to make his way using all of these different con jobs, but in the middle of kind of an exchange with a possible buyer, Godzilla comes in and battles a monster and absolutely upends his whole deal and his life, really. The building he's in is completely destroyed. Some of the people involved appear to be dead. He's exposed, but he's really left reflecting on his life more than anything else. I thought this was a cool and really human examination for this character, and I love that Godzilla was such a driving force for the plot, and yet kind of secondary to sort of this human experience. That's something I see along a lot of these stories, which I did enjoy. Another one has to do with someone trying to make a bioweapon, and there's like a giant mosquito kaiju. That story was really fun because it had art from Joel Jones, which I really liked. It was really gripping artwork from page 1 all the way through the end of that story, I felt. I think that story was called Contagion. Just really liked the visuals in that more than anything. What else? A couple other stories, again, just kind of jumping around some of my favorites. One was pretty novel. It was about this guy who, he was kind of a daredevil or stuntman or sort of just a high-achieving kind of dude who basically was going to climb to the top of Godzilla, presumably to get some kind of DNA sample or something, but he was known for being kind of this strongman, athletic, kind of world-breaking kind of guy, and he was a little bit older in his years. He had a radiation suit, and he basically took on this mission to climb Godzilla. The art style on this one as well was very playful but meaningful, I felt, and I loved the story. Overall, it had kind of an old school charm. Like, I would see a version of this, or I could imagine a version of this coming out in like the 50s or 60s and still being just as charming in its way. And again, I just thought it was a really fun story. In addition to that, there's of course a bunch of examples of Godzilla and monster kind of violence and fights, which I really adored, but I really like the more human tales here. I honestly think that's what makes a strong Godzilla movie as well, is what are the human characters doing? How is everyone responding to Godzilla? Is Godzilla more than just a mindless monster? And I feel like if the answer to that is compelling, then you have a really good Godzilla work, and I see that translated here within the comic book medium. Again, some of these stories hit more than others for me, but overall, I thought it was a fun collection. The The last story I want to highlight as well, there's a story where basically a small family who kind of owns a store in this small town, everyone's evacuated, but he and his family kind of refuse to leave, and Godzilla tears through, and it's really a story about resilience and survival and family and kind of sticking to your roots. That was also a really meaningful and kind of poignant story, I felt. Overall, again, just a pretty fun collection overall. Not everything hit for me, but the ones that did, I just enjoyed pretty greatly. This was just pure entertainment for me, and as a longtime fan of the films, as I mentioned earlier, I was so excited to dive into this collection, and what better way to do it than with an anniversary set like this. Again, I mentioned the art a few times in this collection, but again, just like the writing, the art is just wildly varied from story to story. I think that there's a style that will appeal to just about everyone here in this collection. I think overall the art hit for me better than the stories did, but again, there's just a huge amount of variety. As you can see here, definitely a good representation of what I'm talking about. Just a lot of great action, set pieces, some great monster fights. Obviously, that is also a prime concern for a Godzilla narrative. But again, I'm pulled more to the character-driven nature of Godzilla stories, but a collection would be remiss not to have just great epic scale fights, and this book definitely delivers in spades. I would be curious to anyone watching this video, if you've read other Godzilla comics in the past, could you recommend more Godzilla comics? I did enjoy this collection enough that I would seek out more Godzilla-based storytelling in this medium I also greatly love. I would also be curious if you've read this 70th anniversary collection for Godzilla, what were your thoughts? Did you enjoy this one-shot or the comic book reprints? What did you think overall of the collection? Again, I landed on the side of enjoying it, but again, I don't have a lot of comparison in this medium for Godzilla. Like I said, a handful of the stories were really striking and memorable to me. Some were about mid, and some just didn't hit me, and that doesn't mean there's anything wrong with them. They just maybe weren't to my taste or didn't strike the same emotional or kind of chord with me. But yeah, overall, I had a fun time. And again, just flipping through and seeing the art, seeing so many different people trying to depict this creature, it's just really astounding. Like a lot of the Godzillas that came out of the shadows or looked more monstrous, I enjoyed. Sometimes he looked a little more cartoony, and just kind of everything in between. A very, very fun set here. At the back of the collection, as you've been seeing, we do have a variant cover art gallery, which is a brilliant thing to have at the back of a collection like this. I love that it's all full page reprinted, not small little thumbnails. But for a 70th anniversary collection, I would have loved to see some essays or some written work, or maybe some nods to the film franchise, maybe some archival footage or photos reproduced. I think that this collection maybe would have been augmented by some features like that, and I was bummed not to see it, but of course I was still happy to get some extras at all. At any rate, that brings us to the end of Godzilla's 70th anniversary. All that's left to do now is to give this collection a grade. For a gorgeous array of artistic talent and a handful of gripping, character-driven Godzilla stories, the Comic Book Report is happy to give Godzilla's 70th anniversary a B-. This was definitely an above-average read for me. I'm a sucker for a good short story collection kind of anthology book, and this really delivered more than it failed for me. I think, again, I've said it a couple times in this video, some stories hit more than others for me, but I still really enjoyed the ride altogether. The collection was well made, and I was excited to see it in a hardcover format. I think Godzilla film fans will definitely like this collection. I love that you don't have any barrier to entry to enjoy it as a standalone, and overall, I just had an entertaining and good time. But again, I welcome your feedback. I'd love to know, have you read Godzilla's 70th anniversary or any other Godzilla comics, particularly from IDW? I'd love to hear all of that in the comments section, and thank you so much for watching this review. And a special thank you again to those at IDW for sending over this review copy in exchange for this honest review. And that'll do it. Until next time, this has been the Comic Book Report. Please don't forget to give this video a like, that comment we talked about, and maybe share this video with a friend. Thanks everyone, and have a good one.